Before anyone could respond, a low scratching sound rose from the barn, faint at first, then louder, like claws raking wood. Daisy reared, her bray echoing across the ranch, and even Elias's scarred face paled. "That's not possible," he muttered, his voice cracking. "They were dead. I made sure." The sound grew, joined by a mournful moan, like voices whispering from a grave. Amos's knees weakened, his mind flashing to Martha's stories of restless spirits, tales she'd told with a smile but a shiver. He wasn't a man for ghost stories, but the barn felt alive, its air thick with a presence that made his skin crawl. Nathan motioned for his deputies to flank Elias, but the drifter's eyes were fixed on the barn, his bravado crumbling. "They can't be calling me," he whispered. "I hit them, hard. They didn't wake up." Amos's blood ran cold. Elias wasn't just admitting to murder, he was confessing to something worse. For 3 days straight, Amos Caldwell's old mule, Daisy, had been acting like the barn was a den of rattlers waiting to strike, her stubborn hooves digging into the Montana dirt as she brayed loud enough to rattle the heavens. Amos, a rancher whose 70 years showed in the deep lines etched across his weathered face, couldn't make sense of it. Daisy had been his shadow through blizzards and droughts, hauling hay bales across the 50 acres of Caldwell land without so much as a flinch at a coyote's howl. But now she stood 20 feet from the barn's peeling red doors, her ears pinned back, her dark eyes wide with a fear that sent a chill through Amos's bones. He figured she was just skittish. Maybe a fox had slipped in at night, or the wind had stirred something unnatural in the old structure his father built 40 years ago. But when Amos found what was buried beneath the barn's sagging floorboards, he realized Daisy wasn't just spooked. She'd been trying to save his life all along. The morning sun hung low over the Caldwell Ranch, 10 miles outside Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the rolling plains where golden grass swayed under a cloudless sky. Amos trudged toward the barn, his worn leather boots crunching on the gravel path, each step heavy with the weight of a lifetime spent working this land. His heart ached as he passed the weathered porch where his late wife, Martha, used to sit, her knitting needles clicking in time with the hymns she hummed, her voice as soft as the breeze. 5 years gone, and still, Amos felt her absence like a missing limb. Martha had loved this ranch, loved its quiet strength, but she'd always warned him about its past. "The Harrows owned this land before your daddy," she'd say, her eyes distant. "They up and left one night 30 years back. Nobody knows why, Amos. Nobody asks." He'd brushed it off then, chalking it up to small-town tales spun over coffee at the general store. But now, with Daisy's strange behavior, those stories felt less like gossip and more like ghosts stirring in the shadows. The barn loomed ahead, its red paint chipped and faded, the oak doors creaking in the light wind. Amos paused, running a calloused hand along the rough planks, remembering the summer his father and neighbors raised this barn, their laughter echoing under the July sun. It was a sturdy thing, built to last, with hay bales stacked high in one corner, saddles hung neat on their pegs, and feed buckets lined up clean and empty along the wall. The familiar scent of dried grass and leather filled the air, comforting in its sameness, yet something was off. Daisy, tethered to a post 20 feet away, let out a low, mournful bray, her hooves pawing the dirt as if pleading with him to turn back. "Easy, girl," Amos called, his voice rough but gentle. Her muscles twitched, and she tossed her head, refusing to budge closer. Amos frowned, his gaze sweeping the barn's dim interior. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of sunlight that slipped through gaps in the warped boards, casting a soft glow over the hay-strewn floor. Everything looked right. Too right, maybe. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks, pressing against his chest in a way that made his old heart skip. He stepped deeper into the barn, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. The hay bales were stacked where he'd left them, the saddles untouched, but in the far corner, where the oldest bales sat, something caught his eye. The floorboards there looked uneven, sagging just a fraction lower than the rest. Amos had walked these boards thousands of times, mucking stalls, stacking feed, yet he'd never noticed this before. His pulse quickened as he knelt, pressing a palm to the wood. It gave slightly, creaking in a way that sent a shiver down his spine, like the barn itself was whispering a warning. The hay bales nearby looked disturbed, their edges misaligned as if someone had moved them and tried to cover their tracks. Amos's mind raced. He wasn't a fanciful man. 70 years on a ranch taught you to trust what you could see and touch. But this felt wrong. Had someone been here, sneaking onto his land under cover of night? He thought of Clara Hensley, his neighbor and friend of 40 years, who'd stopped by yesterday in her beat-up pickup, her face lined with worry. "Amos," she'd said, clutching her thermos of coffee, "folks in town are talking. A stranger's been asking about your ranch, about the harrows, about what happened here 30 years ago. He knew things, like where the old well used to be before it was filled in, things only someone from back then would know." Amos had laughed it off, but now, staring at those uneven boards, Clara's words felt like a weight in his gut. He grabbed a crowbar from the tool rack, its cold iron grounding him as his mind spun with possibilities. Why would anyone come poking around his barn? What could they be looking for? Or hiding? He glanced back at Daisy, who stood rigid, her eyes locked on the barn like it was a predator ready to pounce. Amos's hands trembled as he wedged the crowbar under the first loose board. It came up easier than it should have, revealing soft, dark dirt beneath, freshly turned, not packed hard like ground untouched for decades. His breath caught. Someone had been digging, and recently. He pried up a second board, then a third, each one widening the hole and deepening the mystery. The dirt was loose, almost fluffy, and Amos's heart pounded as he realized this wasn't just a prank or a trespasser's whim. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide something here, right under his nose, on the land he'd worked his whole life to keep. Before he could dig further, the distant sound of hoofbeats broke the morning's quiet, sharp and urgent, like a warning shot. Amos froze, his eyes darting to the barn's open door. A cloud of dust rose on the horizon, maybe half a mile off, 3 riders moving fast across the open plain. His grip tightened on the crowbar. These weren't neighbors coming to borrow a tool or share a thermos of coffee. They were riding with purpose, straight for his ranch. Amos's first instinct was to protect his discovery. He dropped to his knees, quickly replacing the loose boards and scattering hay over them, his hands moving with the steady precision of a man who'd faced trouble before. Wiping his palms on his jeans, he stood, forcing his face into a mask of calm as he stepped outside to meet the riders. The lead rider, Sheriff Nathan Brooks, dismounted with a heavy step, his badge catching the sunlight like a warning. Nathan was a big man, late 50s, with steel blue eyes that missed nothing and a voice that carried the weight of 20 years in law enforcement. Behind him, Deputy Sam Carter, a young man with a quick smile but sharper instincts, and Deputy Ellen Watts, new to Willow Creek but already known for her no-nonsense grit, scanned the property like hawks circling prey. Daisy brayed again, louder now, her hooves stomping as if she sensed the tension in the air. "Morning, Amos," Nathan said, his tone steady but laced with something serious. "We need to talk. Got reports of a stranger in town, asking questions about your ranch, specific questions, about the harrows, about who owned this land before your family." Amos's stomach twisted, Martha's stories flooding back. The harrows, gone in the night, no trace, no explanation. He'd never questioned his father's purchase of the ranch, a deal struck cheap and quick 30 years ago. But the way Nathan's eyes studied him, searching for a reaction, made Amos feel like the ground beneath him was shifting. "What kind of questions?" Amos asked, his voice rougher than he meant. He crossed his arms, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. Nathan glanced at his deputies, then back at Amos. "This fella knew things he shouldn't, like where the old well stood before your daddy filled it in. Like the oak tree that came down in that big storm years back. He's not just curious, Amos. He's looking for something. And he's got a reason." Amos's gaze flicked to the barn, where Daisy stood trembling, her braying softer now, but no less urgent. The loose floorboards, the disturbed dirt, the stranger's questions, it all pointed to something buried, something tied to the harrow's disappearance. Amos thought of Martha, how she'd have urged him to face the truth, no matter how dark. "Any idea who he is?" Amos asked, dreading the answer. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Dorothy at the general store got a good look at him. Says he's tall, scarred, with a mean look in his eye. And she swears she's seen him before, back when the harrows were still here." Amos's blood ran cold. Whoever this stranger was, he wasn't just passing through. He knew this land, knew its secrets, and he was coming for them. Daisy's bray echoed across the ranch, a final warning that whatever lay beneath the barn was about to change Amos's life forever. The Montana sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Caldwell Ranch in shades of amber and gray, but Amos Caldwell couldn't shake the cold dread that clung to him like frost on a winter morning. The barn loomed in the twilight, its weathered planks casting jagged shadows across the dirt, and Daisy, his faithful mule, stood tethered far from its doors, her ears twitching nervously as if she sensed something Amos couldn't. The loose floorboards he'd uncovered that morning haunted him, those sagging planks hiding freshly turned dirt, a secret buried beneath the barn his father built 40 years ago. Sheriff Nathan Brooks's words echoed in his mind, a stranger, tall and scarred, asking questions about the Harrow family, who'd vanished from this land 30 years back. Amos, at 70, had seen his share of trouble on the ranch. Blizzards, rustlers, hard winters, but this felt different, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for a truth too dark to stay buried. He gripped the crowbar tighter, his knuckles white, knowing he had to go back into the barn, had to face whatever lay beneath those boards. Martha, his late wife, would have told him to seek the truth no matter the cost. Her memory, her gentle voice, her faith in doing right, pushed him forward, even as his heart pounded with a fear he hadn't felt since he was a boy. Inside the barn, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of hay and something sharper, like damp earth stirred after years of rest. Amos's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating dust motes that swirled like spirits in the still air. Daisy's braying had quieted, but her absence from the barn felt like a warning, her instincts sharper than his own. He knelt by the corner where the floorboards sagged, the crowbar cold in his hands. The boards came up easier than before, each creak echoing in the silence like a gunshot. The hole beneath revealed more loose dirt, and Amos's pulse raced as he dug with his hands, the soil cool and soft under his fingers. About a foot down, his fingers brushed something hard, wrapped in oilcloth. He pulled it free, a small leather journal, its edges worn but intact, the pages yellowed with age. His hands trembled as he opened it, the handwriting neat and feminine, likely belonging to Mrs. Harrow, the mother of the family that disappeared. Elias has changed, the first entry read. He's angry, cruel. Yesterday, he broke the barn cat's neck for scratching him. I fear for Sarah, for John, for myself. Amos's throat tightened. Sarah, the Harrow's young daughter, couldn't have been more than 10. John, her father. The journal went on, detailing Elias's growing violence, threats against neighbors, mutilated animals found near the well, and his mother's desperate plan to send him to an asylum. The final entry stopped mid-sentence. He knows we're planning to... Amos's heart sank. This wasn't just a diary. It was a cry for help, a record of a family's final days, cut short by their own son. He was about to call Sheriff Nathan when a shout broke the silence outside. Amos scrambled to his feet, the journal clutched to his chest, and ran to the barn door. In the fading light, he saw Clara Hensley's pickup truck parked crookedly by the corral, her grandson Tommy sprinting toward the house, his face pale as a ghost. Clara, her gray hair pulled tight in a bun, chased after him, her voice sharp with worry. "Tommy, get back here," she hollered. But the boy, 16 and full of bravado, didn't stop until he reached Amos. "Mr. Caldwell," Tommy stammered, his eyes wide. "I went in the barn, thought I'd prove it wasn't haunted, but I heard voices, whispering my name, coming from the floor." Amos's blood ran cold. He glanced at Clara, who looked as shaken as her grandson. "I told him to stay away," she said, her voice low. "But he's stubborn, like his grandpa was. Amos, this ain't just about that stranger. There's something wrong with this place." Amos wanted to dismiss Tommy's story as a kid's imagination, but the journal in his hands felt like proof of something darker. He sent Tommy to the house with a stern warning to stay put, then turned to Clara. "You said yesterday someone was asking about the Harrows. What else do you know?" Clara's eyes darted to the barn, her hands twisting the hem of her jacket. "My mama was friends with Mrs. Harrow," she admitted. "She said Elias was trouble from the start, mean, calculating. When they disappeared, folks thought they left because of him, but some whispered he did something worse. Amos, if he's back, he's not here for memories." The weight of Clara's words settled over Amos like a heavy quilt. He thought of Martha, how she'd sit on the porch, her Bible open, reading passages about truth and justice. She'd have wanted him to dig deeper, to honor the Harrow's memory. That night, Amos sat at his kitchen table, the journal open under the glow of a single lamp. Each page deepened his unease. Elias's mother wrote of a box he'd hidden, something he bragged would keep him safe forever. Amos's mind raced. Was it money? Evidence? Something worse? He was about to call Nathan when a knock at the door startled him. Pastor Jeremiah Tate, a wiry man in his late 70s with kind eyes and a voice worn soft by years of sermons, stood on the porch, his hat in hand. Clara had called him, worried for Amos's soul. Clara told me what's happening, Jeremiah said, settling into a chair. The Harrow's disappearance broke this town, Amos. I was here then, preaching at First Baptist. Folks wanted to believe they left for a better life, but I always wondered. If Elias Harrow is back, he's after something dangerous, something tied to his sins. Jeremiah's words stirred a fire in Amos. He wasn't just fighting for his ranch, he was fighting for the truth, for the Harrows, for the peace Martha would have demanded. As midnight approached, Amos returned to the barn, the journal tucked in his jacket. The air inside felt colder, the shadows deeper. He knelt by the hole again, digging deeper, but found nothing more. Then it came. A faint scratching, like nails on wood, rising from beneath the floor. Amos froze, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The sound grew, joined by a low moan, mournful and human, as if the earth itself was grieving. Daisy's braying erupted outside, shrill and panicked, her hooves pounding the corral. Amos's heart thundered. He wasn't a man given to ghost stories. 70 years on a ranch taught you to trust the land, not fear it. But this was no coyote or wind. Something was awake beneath the barn, something tied to the Harrows, to Elias, to the journal's chilling words. He stumbled back, the flashlight beam dancing across the walls, and for a moment he swore he saw a shadow move. Formless, fleeting, but real. Amos's thoughts turned to Martha, her faith in goodness, her belief that no secret could stay buried forever. He knew he was running out of time. Elias Harrow was coming, and whatever he'd hidden under this barn wasn't just a secret. It was a curse, one that had already claimed a family and now threatened to claim Amos too. The Montana dawn broke over the Caldwell ranch with a heavy stillness, the kind that settles before a storm, as Amos Caldwell stood outside the barn, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. Daisy, his loyal mule, stood tethered 30 feet away, her ears twitching, her eyes locked on the barn's peeling red doors with a fear that hadn't faded since this nightmare began. The leather journal Amos had found beneath the floorboards weighed heavy in his jacket pocket, its pages filled with Mrs. Harrow's desperate words about her son Elias's cruelty, a boy who'd turned into a monster 30 years ago when the Harrow family vanished from this land. Sheriff Nathan Brooks's warning rang in Amos's ears. Elias Harrow, now a scarred drifter, was back in Willow Creek, asking questions about the ranch, about the barn, about something he'd buried here. Amos, at 70, felt the weight of his years, the ache of losing Martha, his wife of 40 years, and the burden of a ranch built on secrets he'd never known. The journal's final entry, cut off mid-sentence, haunted him, as did the scratching sounds he'd heard last night, like nails clawing at wood from beneath the barn floor. Martha's voice echoed in his mind, her hymns about justice and truth urging him to face whatever darkness lay hidden. But as he gripped the crowbar, ready to dig deeper, a new fear gripped him, not just of Elias, but of what the barn itself might reveal, what it might demand of a man who'd spent his life believing this land was his legacy. Clara Hensley's pickup rattled up the dirt road, her face pale as she stepped out, clutching a faded envelope. "Amos," she said, her voice trembling, "I've been keeping something from you. Before the Harrows disappeared, Mrs. Harrow gave me this letter. She begged me to keep it safe, said it could ruin the town if it got out. I was young, scared. I hid it." Amos took the envelope, his hands shaking as he opened it. The letter, in the same neat handwriting as the journal, was a plea for help. "Elias knows we're sending him away," Mrs. Harrow wrote. "He's hidden a box under the barn, something he says will protect him. I fear he'll kill us all." Amos's heart sank. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. "I should have spoken up 30 years ago," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting Willow Creek, but I let that family down." Amos wanted to comfort her, but before he could speak, Daisy let out a piercing bray, her hooves stomping as her gaze fixed on the tree line at the ranch's eastern edge. Amos followed her stare, his pulse racing. A lone figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, with a jagged scar running from ear to jaw. Elias Harrow had come. Sheriff Nathan Brooks and his deputies, Sam Carter and Ellen Watts, arrived just as Elias stepped into the open, their horses kicking up dust on the gravel path. Nathan dismounted, his revolver drawn but steady, his steel-blue eyes locked on the drifter. "Elias Harrow," he called, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years in law enforcement. "You're under arrest for the disappearance of your family. Come quietly." Elias laughed, a cold, hollow sound that chilled Amos to the bone. "Arrest me, Sheriff? For what? You've got no proof, just old gossip in a town too scared to ask questions." He turned to Amos, his eyes glinting with menace. Caldwell, you're standing on my family's grave. Move aside and I'll take what's mine. A box I buried 30 years ago. It's got secrets not just about me, but about half the folks in Willow Creek. Let me walk, and they stay buried. Amos's stomach twisted. The journal and Clara's letter confirmed Elias's guilt, but his confidence shook Amos. What was in that box? Blackmail? Evidence? Something worse? Before anyone could respond, a low scratching sound rose from the barn. Faint at first, then louder, like claws raking wood. Daisy reared, her bray echoing across the ranch, and even Elias's scarred face paled. "That's not possible," he muttered, his voice cracking. "They were dead. I made sure." The sound grew, joined by a mournful moan, like voices whispering from a grave. Amos's knees weakened, his mind flashing to Martha's stories of restless spirits, tales she'd told with a smile but a shiver. He wasn't a man for ghost stories, but the barn felt alive, its air thick with a presence that made his skin crawl. Nathan motioned for his deputies to flank Elias, but the drifter's eyes were fixed on the barn, his bravado crumbling. "They can't be calling me," he whispered. "I hit them. Hard. They didn't wake up." Amos's blood ran cold. Elias wasn't just admitting to murder, he was confessing to something worse. Driven by Martha's memory and a need for justice, Amos ran to the barn, crowbar in hand. He tore up the loose floorboards, the wood splintering under his strength. The scratching intensified, frantic now, as if something, or someone, was desperate to break free. Clara followed, her hands clasped in prayer, while Tommy, her grandson, hovered at the door, his teenage bravado gone, his face pale from his encounter the night before. The hole beneath the boards revealed a shallow grave, and Amos's heart stopped as a skeletal hand emerged, wrapped in rotted cloth, its fingers curled as if still clawing for freedom. 3 sets of remains lay there, man, woman, child, their bones telling a story of terror, arms outstretched, nails broken from scratching at the wood above. Amos stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. The Harrows hadn't just been killed, they'd been buried alive, trapped beneath the barn, suffocating in darkness. Elias screamed, his composure shattered. "I didn't mean to," he shouted, stumbling backward as Nathan and the deputies closed in. "I hit them with the poker, thought they were gone. I buried them quick with the box to keep me safe." His confession spilled out, raw and broken. "Father fought back, Mother tried to run, little Sarah hid, but I found her. I thought the blows killed them, but I heard breathing as I covered them with dirt. I couldn't stop." The barn's noises peaked, a chilling whisper of Elias echoing through the air, as if the Harrow's spirits were answering his confession. Amos felt Martha's presence, her faith in justice urging him on. He dug deeper, unearthing a rusted metal box, its lock intact despite 30 years underground. Nathan took it, prying it open to reveal a stack of papers. Elias's blackmail notes, detailing illegal deals, affairs, and crimes of Willow Creek's prominent citizens, written by a teenage killer planning his escape. Nathan cuffed Elias, whose eyes remained fixed on the barn, wide with terror. "They're still here," he whispered. "They'll never let me go." The deputies led him away, his ramblings about voices and ghosts fading into the distance. Amos stood by the grave, his heart heavy with the Harrow's suffering. Clara, tears streaming down her face, knelt beside him. "I should have given that letter to the sheriff years ago," she said, her voice breaking. "I let fear silence me." Amos placed a hand on her shoulder, his own grief for Martha mingling with hers. "We're setting it right now," he said, his voice steady despite the horror. "For them. For Martha." The barn's eerie noises stopped, an unnatural calm settling over the ranch. Daisy grazed quietly, her fear gone, as if the Harrow's spirits had found peace. Nathan promised the notes would close old cases, bringing justice to others wronged by Willow Creek's secrets. Amos made a choice. He tore down the barn, board by board, and built a small memorial on the site, a simple cross with the Harrow's names carved into it. He buried their remains in Willow Creek Cemetery, Pastor Jeremiah leading a quiet service as the town looked on, some with guilt, others with relief. Clara, seeking redemption, helped Amos plant wildflowers around the memorial, a promise to never let fear silence her again. Tommy, shaken but wiser, vowed to honor the truth, a lesson for a new generation. Amos sat on his porch that evening, Martha's old hymn book in his lap, her favorite verse about light overcoming darkness open before him. The ranch felt clean, its curse lifted, and Daisy grazed in the corral, her calm a mirror of Amos's own. Willow Creek faced its past, with some named in Elias's notes confessing to lesser crimes, their secrets no longer buried. Amos knew the ranch would always carry the Harrow story, but he'd given them peace, just as Martha would have wanted. The land was his again, not just a legacy, but a testament to truth, hard-won and dearly paid for. The story of the Uneasy Mule is a haunting tale that resonates deeply with American values of truth, justice, and confronting the past. For me, as someone who grew up cherishing the quiet strength of rural life, the narrative stirred a profound sense of unease and awe. Amos Caldwell's journey, driven by his mule Daisy's instincts and his late wife Martha's moral compass, reminds us how the past can linger, demanding to be acknowledged. The horror of the Harrow family's fate, buried alive by their own son, Elias, evokes a visceral reaction, but it's Amos's courage to unearth the truth that hits hardest. His determination to honor a family he never knew, despite the risk to his own legacy, speaks to the American spirit of doing what's right, even when it's painful. Clara's guilt over her silence and Pastor Jeremiah's call for truth further underscore the emotional weight of facing buried secrets, a theme that feels universal yet deeply rooted in the rugged individualism of the American West. The story teaches us several life lessons. First, trust your instincts. Daisy's fear was a warning, just as our gut feelings often guide us when logic alone isn't enough. Second, confronting the past, no matter how dark, is essential for healing. Amos could have ignored the loose floorboards, but his choice to dig deeper brought justice and peace. Finally, silence can be as harmful as action. Clara's hidden letter delayed justice for decades. In our lives, these lessons translate to listening to our inner voice, facing difficult truths about ourselves or our communities, and speaking up when it matters most. Whether it's addressing family secrets or standing up for what's right in our towns, we must act with courage, as Amos did, to ensure the past doesn't haunt our future. For me, this story inspires reflection on my own life. Am I ignoring any loose floorboards in my relationships or community? It's a call to be proactive, to seek truth, and to honor those who came before us by living with integrity. These values, so deeply American, remind us that justice and redemption are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. If the Uneasy Mule gripped you as much as it did me, hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with friends who love a good mystery or a tale of justice served. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories from the heart of the American West and drop a comment below. Tell us what secrets you think are still buried out there or how this story moved you. Your support keeps these tales alive, so join us for the next chapter of Frontier History.